of the in the brood, and then it gets capped over, and those eggs that she's laid in there hatch out while the brood is growing, and lives off of some of the tissue from the larva. Now, it doesn't kill the larva, it doesn't kill the bee, because the bee will come to maturity, and when it hatches out in about 15 to 21 days, it will come out with 4 or 5 mature mites on it. And those mites live off of the fatty tissue up on the underside of the bee. They used to think that lived off the lymph as well, but it doesn't. It lives off, they found out now that it lives off the fatty tissue. Well, those mites then get spread from bee to bee to bee, and they can spread through your entire colony. And this will continue to weaken the colony. And if your colony gets weak, then it can't fight off other kinds of problems that may come across. And particularly important is in the fall, when you're getting ready for winter. If your colony has a overload of varroa mites going into the winter, you will most likely lose that colony during the winter. And a lot of colonies are lost in the winter because they can't hold up to the stresses of winter. Being cold, there's very little forage, they don't have enough to eat, they may be sick, they may be diseased. So they can't make it if they keep having bees die off, and the whole colony will die. So that's probably one of the bigger ones to do. There are some treatments for these and for some of the other things, but there's no silver bullet. There's nothing that you take this and put this in your hive or give this to your bees, and this will kill the varroa mites. There's different things from some acids that you can use to heat treatments that you can use. The biggest recommendation that the National Beekeeping Associations advise and folks that try to help out with beekeeping are to use kind of a mixture of different treatments, so that the bees don't develop any kind of resistance to these treatments. North Carolina has a good beekeeping association, and NC State has a good beekeeping program. That particular picture there is kind of interesting, just because I mentioned the things that the bees get. Well, I don't know if I did or not, but they go out. When they go out to forage. They get nectar, they get pollen, they get water, and they get something called propolis, which is resin from trees, which they use as a glue in the hive. Well, this is a bird bath in my front yard, and they've used this for the last 2 years. They come out there all the time. You have to keep water in it. They like kind of funky kind of water. The funkier it is, the better, because there's minerals in it. They want to get those minerals. If there's a swimming pool nearby, they will go to that because of the salts, and it will kill a lot of your bees too. So they like to go where there's minerals, but they'll all line up with that on warm days, and they're just hauling water back to the hive. But anyway, getting back to North Carolina, the NC State has a good program. They're investing money to build a whole new complex now to study things with bees. There's a couple other states that do a little bit more. Minnesota, with the University of Minnesota, does an awful lot to try to work with bees. I might mention as a side that another thing that they're trying to do with these bees is to develop what they call hygienic bees. Hygienic bees are getting bees that have genetic traits that cause them to be more hygienic, in the fact that they will go in, they can sense if there's a cell that has a larva in it that has mites in that cell. If they sense that, and they will uncap that cell, take that larva out and take it out of the hive and haul it away. And there's bees that do that, and there's genetics is trying to be, they're trying to develop that genetics more and more bees so they can be more prevalent. The majority of bees in this country are either Italian, Carniolan, there's a couple of others, or Russian. Now the Russian bees are sort of looked at as possibly the ones that can be an answer to some of the problems with varroa mites, because the Russian bees come from the far eastern part of Russia, around Vladivostok and that area. The varroa mites were in that area for many decades, long before they ever came to the Western Hemisphere. So the bees there develop some resistance to it, also hygienic behavior to the varroa mites. So Russian queens have been introduced into this country in various places to try to get more of those genetics here. I have one of the queens I have is a Russian, because there is a fellow in town here who has gotten grants from the state as well as nationally to develop the Russian queens. So the queen that actually was in that, and that's in that one, is a Russian queen. Now, I think that they've done better with the varroa mites. I'm not sure, but the thing is, if your hive swarms or you're going to lose that queen, they're going to make their own queen, so they're going to have different genetics. If they do go out and they go to a drone gathering place, these drones are coming from probably 10, 15, 20 different colonies all over. And they're all kinds of bees. So it's good for the genetic mix that you want to get, but you're going to lose your Russian thing. So it's not a perfect kind of a system, and some people don't believe in it as much as other people. So it's sort of what you decide to do. Andy, I don't know how we're doing on our time. If we have one question,
I think we're doing pretty good, Dan. I do want to get to the kind of honey production if we could.
Yeah.
This is a picture of my buddy Dan there. This is your first, isn't this your first honey crop there?
That was the first honey crop. So that's we call it a frame, and it's full of honey, and it's all capped. That's that white looking stuff. That's called capping. And basically it's a kind of, it's wax that they put over. When they put the honey up into the cells, they go ahead and evaporate the water off of it, because they have to get it down to below 18% moisture before they cap it. Otherwise it'll ferment. So when they put it into these cells, they go into all the system where they are basically fanning their wings all up through where the honey is to bring that moisture down to that particular level. Once it's at that level, don't ask me how they know how that is. I don't know that, but they know when it's down below the 18%, and then they will cap it. So basically then it will never ferment and it will never spoil. It's antibacterial. So bacteria can't, well, it's bacteriostatic anyway. Bacteria cannot grow in honey. So that's why honey's been used in medicine a lot. Now this is just the two hives when I originally started. This was when I did a split, which means taking off some of the brood when they're in the early spring. There's a lot of brood, because they will swarm if they get too many, but they don't have enough space. So I took some brood off, introduced a queen into it, and so that I'm just feeding them. That's a front feeder. There may also be a top feeder on there too. And when you feed them, you're feeding them basically sugar water. This is back at that the PESTS, the moths. That is a assassin fly that has one of my bees. I happen to be watching the bees that are down below me there, and this thing landed next to me, and I got a better look at it, and I got my phone out and started taking some pictures, and there might be one closer up than that, Andy, I'm not sure, but yeah, you can see one of the bees there. That assassin fly, it's not those things you see in the news from out west. This is something that's
not the murder hornet.
This is something that's around here. It's called an assassin fly, and it lives off of not bees, just bees, but other flying things too. And I saw it afterwards, not this particular one, I assume, but others, they will hang out near the hive and they will catch them in mid-flight coming back to the hive, and then take them off and inject a bunch of enzymes in them, suck that back out and go back for more. So bees have a tough life. There's a lot of things they're trying to get them. This is that small hive beetle I was telling you about. I think I mentioned where maybe I didn't get around to talk about that, but they're in almost all the hives as well, but they don't cause any problems if you have a good healthy hive. The bees will keep them. They even will corral them off. Take some of that propolis and keep them in little places, and so they can't go out and lay their eggs where they don't want them. Well, if the hive gets weak, then the small hive beetles will start laying their eggs everywhere, and they like to lay them around where the honey is, where the brood is, and it just turns into this slimy mess. They don't go after the bees, but they go after every part of the hive. And so it just makes it a slimy mess, and the bees can't exist. So you can see all the larvae there. So basically this happened after I had a bear attack on my hives. I had 3 hives. The bear got into 2, put them back together. And well, this is, so you can see where the bear had done the damage. Well, one of them, the hive had gotten damaged so bad that it gradually just kept dwindling down. And then the small hive beetles took over and destroyed the hive. So,
and Dan was telling me, you were telling me, Dan, that that you thought you were safe from the bears because your hives were right off of your deck. So this is the picture you took from your deck. So you figured it's close enough to the house, the bear's not going to come, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, mistake. Because as you know, your place.
That's right. So, and he has a lot of pictures here from the damage that the bear had done. And
I didn't know, at the time I did this, I didn't know the bees were still there, but I didn't know. So I assumed that the queen was still there, or at least her pheromone was there, but I didn't know for sure if she could have gotten killed, if just the pheromone was still there, or if she even got hurt. So I put the hives back together. You can see what they're at. They're after, the biggest thing, they're after some of the honey and stuff, but they're after that brood. They want the protein. And that's what they come in and eat the most of when the bears get into a hive.
And here's a picture of Dan looking very, very unhappy.
Right, I'm not very happy that day.
Reviewing the bear damage, yeah. So
fortunately, I had one of my brother-in-laws who was also a beekeeper. He was here visiting me at the time, and so he helped me put the hives back together to get them back into shape.
Yeah. And have you been stung many times, Dan?
Yeah, not as much after the first year, because you get smarter and you make sure you put your PPE on instead of just thinking, well, I think I can go in there and be all right. I can just go do this one little thing. Well, you learn you don't do that, because for me, it hurts to get stung. So I'm not happy about it. Some people say it doesn't bother them at all. It bothers me. So it's not as much. No, I think this past year I've only got stung maybe a couple of times is all.
Yeah. So this is after you got everything put back together, right?
Right.
Put up the electric fence to keep the bear out.
Yeah. So electric fence was up within 24 hours. Most of the beekeepers around here have electric fences around there.
That makes sense. I mean, if you're going to do it in Polk County, you're definitely going to have it. Have an electric fence around it. So now we're to the harvest, right? Yeah,
this is a harvest. So these are boxes of frames that have honey in them that I took out to. I belong to a local bee club, and if you're interested at all get into beekeeping, that's where you want to start. You want to start with your local bee club. Well, our local bee club, if you're a member, and it costs $7 a year, so it's just nothing. You can use our honey house that the club has put together, and the honey house has extractors in it and all the equipment that you need to extract the honey from your frames. And that's a look inside the honey house. The big one on the right, that holds, I think 20 or 24 frames, and the one on the left holds 12, I believe. Well, that might be the 4 one. That's my daughter. She's using a capper, and she's cutting. It's an electric knife, and it's cutting the caps off of the frames before we put them into the extractor.
So you can get to the honey, right?
Yeah, because it won't come past. You can spin it in the centrifuge. Those caps are on there tight, and the honey won't get out of there. That's just the cappings down in that tub.
Yeah.
You can use those cappings. That's good wax. People will get the honey out of it, and then use that wax for making candles and different things.
And this is putting it in the extractor, right?
Extractor, right. And this is the one that holds 12. So you just put them in and They just sort of go around there.
And so they get just sit on those little
Right.
frames or those little
Right.
trays, right?
Exactly. And it goes down to the bottom, and I think there, in probably some of the pictures you could see down at the bottom, there's a what's called a gate where you let the honey out, and you want to let it out before it gets up onto where the honey is spinning up there, because that can do some damage to your motor and stuff. But you go ahead and open that up and get your honey out. Then you'll see a little silver kind of thing on top of the bucket. That's a filter. You're filtering out. This is raw honey coming straight from the hive, so it's got various capping stuff with the wax and stuff like that in it, but it's also got bee parts, legs, wings, things like that that might be in there as well. So that is your first filtering to filter out that kind of thing. It doesn't filter out any pollen or any of the nutrients or anything like that. So that's why the honey that we have, then it's raw honey. You call it raw honey because it's not been pasteurized or anything like that. That fella is my mentor. He's been doing it. He's about my age, and he's been doing it since he was about 8 years old. He's from the county here.
Yeah.
Now he has about 40 to 50 hives.
Whoa.
But last year I think he lost 15 hives.
Wow.
So it doesn't make any difference how experienced you are. If something happens to those bees, it's going to happen. So it can happen to anybody. And that's some of the honey after I brought it back home in buckets. And I will put it through one more filter just to get any more of the wax out that I can. And then I'll put in bottles to sell it. So now that's home, because I do have a small extractor of my own that I use if I have a few frames at the house that I want to do yet. I have just a hand crank extractor that I can use to do that. And that's just some of the honey from one of the crops, and that's some of the honey with my label on it.
And you told me that the comb is something that you don't want to pull out, right?
Right. And people always say they want comb honey, and I'm sure everybody that's here today has heard of comb honey, and they have had comb honey when they were growing up and everything, but you just don't see it as much anymore. And that's because with managed beekeeping now, it requires 3 pounds of honey. Bees have to have 3 pounds of honey to eat in order to make 1 pound of wax. So that's a lot of honey that you're losing to make the wax. So now you try to preserve that comb, because you could spin all that honey out of there, then put those frames right back in the hives that have already been pulled out and have the comb there, and the bees can just fill it back up again. So these I did for a niece who wanted some, so I did cut up a couple frames for her to have some comb honey. And you could find comb honey yet, but you find now that you pay a pretty price for comb honey. And this is some honey that was at a local coffee shop that sold my honey.
And I believe that's the end of the slides. So I'm gonna unshare here and see if we have any other questions from folks. Stan and Stephen. I like that. Okay, Stan first and then Stephen.
Well, Dan, thank you very much. This is definitely a complicated process and not as easy as you would assume.
Yes.
A couple of my questions are already answered. One was, what about bears? And the other one was, what about stings? So could you go over the economics of it a little bit? In other words, how much a bee suit cost and how much it costs for the hives and that sort of thing? I mean, we don't want you to give away any trade secrets, but maybe just give us an idea of.
I have no secrets there.
Dan is an open book.
I'll tell you, I am an absolute dummy yet. I feel like an absolute dummy yet as a beekeeper. I tell you, I go around these people and they're talking about bees, things, and I say, I don't even know what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're saying. So there's no secrets to sell except any information that I possibly might have. But that's a very good question. If you're interested in beekeeping, the first thing, as I said, I would get with a local beekeeping club. And most beekeeping clubs will sponsor a class. you want to take that class, because the first you'll go in thinking just the way you said, Stan, just as I did, well, this would be fun. This would be a good thing to do. And you come walking out saying, I can't do that. Because it becomes very complicated, but you can. And because one of the things you'll pick up are mentors and people that you can talk to. Now, I wrote down a couple of pricing kinds of things. Most places will sell you a beginner's kit, and that will be a suit with a smoker, all the woodenware with the hive frames, and bee brush and a tool and that sort of thing. The whole batch, and it'll be for a 10 frame or 8 frame hive. And that will run you anywhere from $250 to $350 to kind of get a start on things. There are a couple other kinds of hives. There's a nuke, which stands for nucleus. More and more people are using nucleus to just raise their bees in. But nukes really come from where you get your bees. That's how they kind of got started. And speaking of that, then you need to buy bees once you have your equipment and everything. And they come in two different ways. One is a package, which most of us are familiar with the screen box that you see, a bunch of bees and a queen in the center. That's called a 3-pound box. And there'll be about, I think about 10,000 bees in that, and 1 queen, but she's new to that. That's a whole new setup. Those bees have never met that queen before, so they have to kind of get started. So it's a little less expensive, about $100 to $120 generally, although it might be a little bit more to get that kind of thing. And then they have to get started from scratch. The other way to buy bees, and it is the way I went, was to buy them as a nuke, which stands for nucleus. And that basically is a nuclear hive. And that'll be a 5-frame box. It's usually cardboard box. And these will have 5 frames in them, 3 frames that already have brood in various stages, capped and larval stage, that sort of thing, with a queen who's mated and she's laying. She'll have workers in there. There may be 20,000 bees in there. They all know each other. Everything is operating already. So you buy it already made in a small kind of a package compared to your regular hive. That's going to be a 10-frame hive. You buy that, and then you put that into your 10-frame or 8-frame hive. It'll run you a little bit more, $170, $190, $200, but you know you've got something then. They're all familiar with each other, because you don't have any guarantee that that queen that you're getting in that package is going to be accepted by those bees. They may decide they don't like her, and they may kill her. Because of the pheromone, they don't know that. They're getting used to it. Or she may not have been well mated. You know, it may be one that they just stuck in there. It's not a well-mated queen. Doesn't have good genetics. May not do well. Whereas if you buy a nuke, things are already happening there. So I won't go into any more of that. But basically, those are the kinds of things cost-wise to do it. Now you can get cost for when you start extracting your honey, for buying your bottles and that sort of thing as well.
Stephen.
So a friend of mine, actually this conversation came up because a friend of mine, at least the idea of having a beekeeper in the meeting, a friend of mine actually is a beekeeper locally, and I think she keeps the hives out at Overmountain. And she made a comment one time I found pretty fascinating. We were talking about her being stung, and she said the same thing. She's not stung very often, but she said you also have to it depends on which hive you're dealing in. She said she has one hive that's much more aggressive, and she has to go full gear. Yeah. Then she said she has one hive that's so laid back, she doesn't even have to put anything on her face almost. I mean, they don't even swarm her. So she said the hives have their own personalities. And that was to me a different concept than I was expecting.
That's exactly right. Well, that somewhat gets into the kinds of bees. The Italians have been the main bees in this country, and they're pretty laid back bee. They don't really get too aggressive. They're pretty calm. Carniolans are also from East European area.
Those Russians, though, you can never trust them, right?
Well, that's exactly right, because the Russians they're more aggressive. And I could tell in my hive, the Russians, you didn't want to mess with them too much because they will come after you. They're more excitable than the others, but that's all part of the genetics that they're trying to instill in them. Now, at the same time, some of those too are better honey producers than others. And your friend may have mentioned that as well, that depending on some of the where these bees come from, they're they're better honey producers than others. I don't know if it's because of foraging or because of their more discipline in the hive. I don't really know, but it is absolutely right. They can get pretty aggressive with some of the bees, and others real laid back.
We've got time for one or two more questions. Anybody have a question? Hand up. I'm one time. Okay, Ron and then Stan.
Can you speak a little bit, Dan? I mean, about, we always hear about the health benefits of honey, but trying to get it as local as possible, helping people with allergies and other things like that.
Right. Well, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on that. That certainly is something that's very important to people. I will get asked all the time, is this local honey? And almost everybody that buys my honey, that buys from me personally, buys it because it is local and because they feel like getting local honey with the pollen that's local and other kinds of nutrients that may be in it are helpful for allergies and other kinds of things. So I think that there's probably something to it. As a beekeeper and somebody selling honey, I want to believe that because it's helpful to me. We've had some people come and give talks on that, and I don't know if there's any definitive research that explains that or not, but I do believe that there is some benefits to doing that. And it's one of the reasons why you want to buy local honey too, because what's in these stores is not honey. And the state is trying to develop a program where they can certify this honey, that it is what it says it is, that if they say it's sourwood honey, it is sourwood honey. If they say it's a multifloral, it is, and that it is 100% honey too.
One last question from Stan Gibson.
Dan, could you tell us about people who possibly move their hives into orchards and things for that of that nature for pollination, like the hiders, for example?
Yeah,
Do you know anybody that does that, or?
Well, I actually have had some people when I make a split, they want me to bring the hive out to their place around here. If they said, well, could you just bring it here? You have all the honey. We just want you to bring your hive out here. We have a big garden. We want to have the bees nearby. So people have asked me, and I know that other people, I'm a small potato around here, but other people do more. I know that there's a fellow here in the county who loads up a flatbed truck and goes down to Hendersonville, and he contracts with various apple orchards down there to help them with their pollination when blossom time is going. And they've been doing it for a number of years, bringing in flatbed trucks of hives to help with the pollination.
All right. Well, Dan, great program. Thank you so much. Let's thank Dan for his wonderful program, and good job. And you may, if you feel like you need to drop off now, you can. We've got about 7 minutes left in the meeting, and we're going to do Happy Bucks, which is something I hope you stay, because I've got 2 Happy Bucks to start off. One is for Dan and one is for Ron for coming to the meeting today, just for being friends with Dan for so long, and for Ron to have you in the community and have you interested in Kiwanis. So I got 2 Happy Bucks there. But while I'm thinking about it, before we get to the next Happy Buck, we have a board meeting tonight, 5:15. So if you're on the board, use the same link, 5:15. Linda has an announcement.
Just a reminder, there's no meeting next week. Did you get that?
Right. No. Oh, that's right.
Okay.
No meeting next week, because the presidential inauguration takes place at noon, which is the same time as our meeting. And I asked Stephen about it. He said, I think we'll take that week off as a civic duty for anyone who wants to attend the inauguration. So thank you so much, Linda. Okay, other Happy Bucks. Oh, Sharon, Happy Buck for my wife, Sharon. She's got a crooked picture on the wall behind her, and she might want to straighten that out. So
Whoops.
other Happy Bucks. Other happy bucks? Janet,
Well, I was going to let you all know that today is Stephen's birthday.
but he just left. That's
just left.
right. Because he had to
Left.
be, he just texted me, he's got to be in Spindale at 1:30. Ah,
We
so
didn't get to sing happy birthday to him.
remind me next week, 2 weeks from now, and we'll sing to him then.
All right.
I sent Stephen a card from the club, so.
Oh, good.
he'll
Okay.
get it today.
Sharon, did you have a happy buck?
I just have a happy buck for Dan, just for being a great guy and being a great friend all these years and being a great beekeeper. I'm always amazed. He always is so enthusiastic about his bees.
Well, if you ever start talking to a beekeeper, you will soon find that they can talk on ad nauseum about bees. So